action regarding the Turkish attacks in northern Syria? And have the Kurds, as Senator Graham said, been shamelessly abandoned?
So we have no soldiers in the area. We've been talking to Turkey for 3 years. They've been wanting to do this for many years, as you know. They've been fighting each other for centuries. They've been fighting each other for hundreds of years. This has been going on. We were put into this battle, interjected. It was supposed to be a 30-day period, and we've been there for many, many years. And it's time to get out. We're speaking to both sides. We've told President Erdogan how we feel, but we are speaking to both sides, and we're seeing what can be made out of a situation. But we have no soldiers in the area. You know, we're getting out of the endless wars. We have to do it. And eventually somebody was going to have to make the decision. And frankly, we're getting a lot of praise from that decision. People are saying, gotta sometime bring our people back home. We're really serving, and we were serving as a police force. We had defeated ISIS. We defeated the Caliphate 100%. Erdogan and the existing groups of people, including Kurds, but you have the PKK, which is a natural enemy with Turkey, and likewise and opposite. They've been fighting again for many, many years. Their bitter enemies have been always, probably, possibly, always will be. So we are out of there. We've been out of there for a while. No soldiers whatsoever. We are taking some of the most dangerous ISIS fighters out. We've taken them out, and we're putting them in different locations where it's secure. In addition, the Kurds are watching, and if the Kurds don't watch, then Turkey's going to watch, because they don't want those people out any more than we do. But we have taken a certain number of ISIS fighters that are particularly bad, and we've wanted to make sure that nothing happened with them with respect to getting out. And I think we're doing a great job. I think the people of this country, I campaigned on ending the endless wars. We're all over the world fighting wars. Half the places, nobody even knows what they're doing over there. And I feel that we are doing the right thing, and I think the country feels that too. We've had tremendous support outside of the Little Washington area, and even in Washington, people are saying you're doing the right thing. It has to be done, otherwise you're never going to do it. At the same time, we're dealing with both sides. We're going to see what we can do.
This morning, you cautioned Erdogan. Since then, it appears as though there have been casualties on the Kurdish side. Are you concerned about escalation, and are you concerned that Erdogan will try to wipe out the Kurds?
I will wipe out his economy if that happens. I've already done it once with Pastor Brunson. I'm sure that I hope that he will act rationally. But you do have to understand they've been fighting each other for many, many decades. Actually, for centuries, they've been fighting each other. And it was time for the Americans. We did a great job. We took care of ISIS. We captured 100%. You remember I was thinking, John, of leaving at 97 and 96%, and that last 3 or 4% was the hardest part. And they told me it would take 1 year to 2 years to do it, and I did it in a month. Remember that? I flew to Iraq, and I met with a lot of great generals there, great generals. They said, sir, we can do it in 2 weeks to a month. And we did it in 2 weeks to a month, and we took it. And in the meantime, we've been watching over a lot with the Kurds, watching over a lot of prisoners, some very bad people. A few in particular very bad, really bad. And some of those people we've already taken. We've taken them out. They should go back, by the way. They should go back to Europe. Many of them came from Europe, but they should go back to Germany, to France, I spoke with Boris Johnson, a couple to UK, some to UK actually, but they came from various parts of Europe. They didn't come from our country, and we did them a big favor, and we said to France, we said to Germany, we said to various countries in Europe, we'd like you to take your people back. Well, we don't want them, we don't want them. How about you taking them? I said, we don't want them either. Nobody wants them. They're bad, but somebody has to watch over them. I said, look, we did you a big favor. You take your people back. You take them back. They're citizens in many cases of those countries, of France, Germany. They didn't want to take them back. I gave them one chance. I gave them another chance. I gave them a third chance, and I even gave them a fourth chance. They didn't want to take them back. Not that I blame them too much. They're used to this with the United States, taking advantage of the United States, whether it's on trade or NATO, they take advantage of the United States. But we think that maybe the Kurds will do a job, and if not the Kurds, we think Turkey will do a job. But we have thousands of people, thousands. I don't know if you know that. We have thousands of captured fighters and thousands and tens of thousands of family members. And we did a big favor to a lot of countries, and those countries didn't want to take them back. So that's the way it goes. Steve?
These ISIS fighters escape and pose a threat elsewhere.
Well, they're going to be escaping to Europe. That's where they want to go. They want to go back to their homes, but Europe didn't want them from us. We could have given it to them. They could have had trials. They could have done whatever they wanted. But as usual, it's not reciprocal. You know my favorite word, reciprocal. That's all I want. I don't want an edge. I just want reciprocal. And it's not reciprocal, Steve. It's not a fair deal for the United States. And when President Obama took the PKK, you know, when they bring in PKK, that's a tough deal because that's been a mortal enemy of Turkey. So when you bring them into a partnership, it's a tough situation because it's tough for Turkey. It's probably tough for them. They've hated each other for many, many years, for hundreds of years. I mean, it's amazing when you look at history and you look at culture, but you look at the length of the time and the fighting for so long. So we imposed ourselves into it. And look, I've said it. I said it just yesterday. The single worst country, the United States, if you take a look at, you know, what we're doing with countries and the relationships we have with countries, but maybe putting it a different way, the worst mistake that the United States has ever made, in my opinion, was going into the Middle East. It's a quagmire. We're up to close to $8 trillion, and we're bringing our folks back home. We have great, talented military. We're bringing them back home. Our military has never been stronger, but we're now acting as police. We're policing areas. We're doing jobs that other countries should be doing. We're doing jobs, frankly, that Europe should be doing. We're doing jobs that Russia should be doing, that Iran should be doing, that Iraq, Turkey, Syria should be doing. They should be doing this. We shouldn't be doing it. We're 7,000 miles away.
Mr. Graham is talking about imposing economic sanctions on Turkey over this incursion into Syria. What do you think about that?
Well, I
Would
think
you
it's
support
okay.
that?
I've already told that to President Erdogan. Far more than sanctions. I'll do far more than sanctions. Lindsey, and I'd feel differently. I think Lindsey would like to stay there for the next 200 years and maybe add a couple of 100,000 people every place. But I disagree with Lindsey on that. But I will tell you that I do agree on sanctions, but I actually think much tougher than sanctions if he doesn't do it in as humane a way as possible. But I've gotten him to stop for virtually from the first day that I was in office. But they've wanted to fight, and that's the way it is, and they've done it for so long. Yes, go ahead, please.
So, what does this humane way as possible actually mean?
Well, we're going to have to
mean
see. We're going to have to
civilians?
define that as we go along. They want to, if you listen to Erdogan, he wants to have people go back to where they came from, go back to Syria. Right now, he's holding, in all fairness to him, he's holding millions of people. That would be all over the place if he wasn't holding them. So he wants to repatriate. He wants to have them go back into the area that he's looking at. But we'll see. We'll see how he does it. He can do it in a soft manner. He can do it in a very tough manner. And if he does it unfairly, he's going to pay a very big economic price.
You said with the letter that you sent up to Nancy Pelosi yesterday, you appeared to declare war on the impeachment inquiry. Can you tell us in your own words why you think it is incumbent upon the House to hold a full vote to authorize an inquiry? And if they were to hold a vote and it were to be positive, would you then cooperate with the inquiry?
Well, let me just say that the Republican Party and President, but the Republican Party has been treated extremely badly by the Democrats, very unfairly. Because they have a tiny margin in the House, they have eviscerated the rules. They don't give us any fair play. It's the most unfair situation people have seen. No lawyers, you can't have lawyers, you can't speak, you can't do anything. You virtually can't do anything. And then on top of it, they have a guy named Schiff, and Nancy Pelosi knows all this because she's just as guilty as he is. But you have a man named Schiff, where I had a perfect phone call with the president of Ukraine. Like, I mean, perfect. People read it, but they don't read that. They heard Schiff's version of it. He defrauded the American public. He gave the most horrible rendition, adding his own words. I mean, Mark Meadows is here. I think I can say honestly, Mark, you didn't believe it when you heard it. And Mark's never heard anything like it. And many of the people that we work with, including Democrats, have never heard anything like it. He made up a phone call. He made it up. Because what happened is they spoke about a day too early. They heard a whistleblower who came out with a false story. You know, people say, oh, it was fairly close. It wasn't close at all. What the whistleblower said bore no relationship to what the call was. We have a transcribed call done by professionals. And the call was a perfect call. But Schiff made it up. Then it turns out that the whistleblower was in cahoots with Schiff. Then it turns out that the whistleblower is a Democrat, strong Democrat, and is working with one of my opponents as a Democrat that I might end up running against. The whole thing is a scam. It's a fix. And we wrote a letter yesterday, and probably ends up being a big Supreme Court case. Maybe it goes a long time. I don't know. But the Republican Party has been treated unbelievably badly and unfairly by the Democrats, John.
But again, sir, if they held a vote in the full House and the vote were to
Well,
authorize,
that
would you
sounds
would
okay.
you cooperate?
Well, we would if they give us our rights. It depends. If they vote and say you can't have lawyers, you can't ask questions, you can't have anybody present, all of these crazy things. And even some of the reporters said to me, it really is an unfair situation. They ask all the questions, and then, for instance, the ambassador who testified was a fine gentleman. He gave great testimony for us. But we don't get to do any of that or show any of that. So they brought out only the couple of negative things, all which were knocked out by his other statements. It was a great witness for us, but if you would have listened to them, you would have said it was a better witness for them. It wasn't. It wasn't even close. He was a fine gentleman. And we saw that, and we said, that's very unfair. Yes?
Mr. President, there are reports this afternoon that the Chinese are lowering their expectations for a trade deal. Are you also lowering your expectations for a trade deal?
No, I don't think so. I think they feel that I'm driving a tough bargain, but I have to. You know it better than anybody. You do a good job over there. Watch a lot. We are so far down in terms of where we started from presidents that didn't do their job for many years. Since the World Trade Organization founding, China went in 2001 or so. China went in and just ripped off the world. So, and I told that to President Xi. I said, you know, this can't be like a 50-50 deal. Because a 50-50 deal, you're like up there, we're down here. So a 50-50 deal, it doesn't work, right? You got to have a little balance. This has to be a better deal from our standpoint. And I think they fully understand it. One of the really good meetings I had today was with our people on opioids and drugs and fentanyl in particular with respect to your question. And they said that Chinese leadership has a lot of respect for our president. And they are really being much more careful. It's a much different situation. We have some great drug numbers. Now, what is great drug? If you're down 15, 16, 20, 25%, it's still horrible what's going on in this country and in the world. In the whole world, it's horrible. But no, I think they have a lot of respect for us. First time they've ever respected us. I think China has a lot of respect for me and for our country and for what we're doing. And I think they can't believe what they've gotten away with for so many years.
Are the Chinese wrong to be putting pressure on the NBA, sir?
Well, the NBA is a different thing. I mean, I watch this guy, Steve Kerr, and he was like a little boy. He was so scared to be even answering the question. He couldn't answer the question. He was shaking. I don't know. I don't know. He didn't know how to answer the question. And he'll talk about the United States very badly. I watched Popovich, sort of the same thing, but he didn't look quite as scared, actually. But they talk badly about the United States, but when it talks about China, they don't want to say anything bad. I thought it was pretty sad, actually. It'll be very interesting. Excuse me?
Are you okay then with the Chinese government pressuring the NBA over Hong Kong?
They have to work out their own situation. The NBA they know what they're doing, but I watched the way that, like, Kerr, Popovich, and some of the others were pandering to China, and yet to our own country, it's like they don't respect it. It's like they don't respect it. I said, what a difference. Isn't it sad? It's very sad. To me, it's very sad. John?
Mr. President, Joe Biden came out for the first time today and said you should be impeached. Your response?
Well, he's falling like a rock. We have him on tape with corruption. I mean, he's getting the prosecutor for, I guess, John, it was $2 billion, saying we're not going to give you the $2 billion or whatever the amount was unless you get rid of this prosecutor. And then he goes, lo and behold, the prosecutor was gone. And that was the prosecutor. Excuse me, John?
1.2 billion.
$1.2 billion. Not a lot of money. And then his son takes out $1.5 billion from China. And by the way, the $50,000 a month that he was getting from Ukraine looks like it's $168,000 split among him and somebody else, his friend. And also there's a payment of about $3 million to his son. His son just got thrown out of the Navy. So Biden is dropping like a rock. I don't think he's going to make it. I didn't think he was going to make it for a long time. I don't think he's going to make it. And I guess this is one way he can do it. You know, he didn't say that until right now, and he sees what's happening to him. I guess he's no longer the front runner. But look, I feel badly for him because I know he's going through a lot. He's been hit, and he's been caught red-handed. I mean, here's a man who is on tape saying exactly what he's going to do in terms of corruption, and he gets away with it. If that ever happened to a Republican, they'd be getting the electric chair right now. They'd be right now being walked into the electric chair. It's a whole different standard. What Joe Biden said on tape, this isn't like, gee whiz, we think. What he said on tape, and the fake media doesn't want to play the tape. They hardly play it. So I feel, you know, that it's too bad what's happened to him. He's sinking and his campaign's sinking. But he walked away with hundreds of, I mean, you look at the kind of numbers. His son, who is at best incompetent, got thrown out of the Navy. I don't even want to say why. A subject that we just discussed. I don't want to say why. But he gets thrown, and all of a sudden he's making a deal with Ukraine where they're getting $168,000 a month between the two of them. $168,000, and he gets $3 million payments, and all of this money coming out. And the kid has no expertise in energy, and it's an energy company. He has no expertise. You and I both know much more than he does, John. And then you walk into China, and a couple of days later, 10 days later to be exact, he gets $1.5 billion out of China, and he's got no expertise. And I have friends that are the smartest people on Wall Street. I said, is that possible? They say, no, it's not possible. It's a pretty sad situation. Please.
I just want to clarify something you said earlier. If Pelosi holds a vote on the floor on impeachment and commits to the rules of previous impeachment proceedings, you'll participate in that investigation?
Yeah, if the rules are fair, because I don't know exactly your definition. If Republicans get a fair shake, because the Republicans have been, look, we were very nice to them. When Paul Ryan was the Speaker, he really wouldn't give subpoenas. And I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent. Here's a man that knows it very well. They'd go in with all of the corruption that you've been reading about and all of the things that they did wrong with Comey and all of these people and all of the things they did wrong. When we wanted a subpoena, meaning they wanted a subpoena, it was very hard to get it, and I'm not sure he ever even issued a subpoena. And Nancy Pelosi issues subpoenas, come on in and get them, gives them to Nadler, gives them to Crooked Schiff. I mean, this Schiff is one crooked guy. The guy made up my phone call. Think of it. In the United States Congress, he made up my phone call. And I've had people that said, I didn't like the way you talked to the Ukrainian president. I said, did you read my speech? No, I heard Schiff, Shifty Schiff. I heard Schiff. I said, that's how I said. I said, well, let me see what he said. A lot of people saw that. And frankly, I think if it wasn't for me, I don't know if anybody would have even noticed and called him out. He took my really, believe it or not, congenial and gentle words, and he made me sound like a tyrant. It's a terrible thing. He defrauded the American public. I mean, honestly, I don't know what can happen, but there are those that say he should be prosecuted for what he did. He should certainly be impeached, but he should be prosecuted for what he did. And I think he's a very bad leader of this movement. Yes, please.
On the phone call, there's a new report out today that the whistleblower says a White House official came to him and said you committed a crime on that call. Did any White House official express any concern to you
No,
or
no.
speak to you about that phone call?
It's all a
after-
big con, don't you understand? Look, the phone call, you have it. It's the transcript. That's why they keep saying, oh, the whistleblower said this and that. What happened is, if they would have seen the transcript early, they wouldn't have had a whistleblower, because he wouldn't have said there was nothing he could say. All you have to do is read the transcript, very calm. And what's even more important than the transcript in a certain way, although I think the transcript is the most important, because it was really plain vanilla. No emotion, no nothing. These are crooked people that are doing. These are Democrats, headed by a Democrat lawyer, a big Democrat lawyer. This is a con job. This is a con being perpetrated on the United States public and even the world. And the world is watching, and they get it better than a lot of other people. It's very interesting. But a poll just came out today. Very small people want to see something, even though I only get negative press from you people. Not you necessarily. But that's the way it is. So I say this, look, all you have to do is read the transcript. But you know what's almost as good as the transcript, I think, is the Ukrainian president saying he didn't even know what they were talking about. No pressure. The foreign minister of Ukraine saying, no, it was a very normal call. There was no pressure at all. What is bad is when you see all of the elements, when you see that Schiff saw the whistleblower, when you see what the whistleblower said about the phone call, and it was totally different. He made it up. And I don't know why a person that defrauds the American public should be protected, okay?
Your administration tried to bury that transcript in
Well,
extra
that I
level.
don't know. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I can say this. I assume it was for leaks. I have no idea. I'm just answering. Because this city is like the leaking capital of the world. If you want to get something out to the press, all you have to do is hand it to somebody in Washington. So I assume it was for leaks. I mean, I've read that, and it doesn't seem like a big deal. What is a big deal? I think they're probably trying to protect it from leaks. But here's the other thing. We gave that transcript over almost immediately. It wasn't like we waited till now. Till now would be immediately, because it's only been doing it for 3 weeks. We gave that transcript up almost immediately. And you know, when I heard Schiff's phony version, and when I heard what was being horribly said by this so-called whistleblower, and I'd like to find who is the person in between the whistleblower and hearing about the conversation. The conversation was, I think, a perfect conversation. But who's the person giving this information? If that person exists, I'm not sure that person exists. But I think it's important, and I say this to Congress, I think it's important to find out who that person is. Because we could have a spy, and I don't want to have spies when I'm negotiating with China and Syria and all of the countries. If you look at Turkey with Erdogan, I have calls with all these people, and Kim Jong-un. I don't want to have spies in the White House. I want to be free to make calls. I don't think it's fair that somebody interprets a call. He didn't interpret it wrong. I don't mind a misinterpretation. This was a fraud, because that call was perfect. And if you read the whistleblower's report, it bore no resemblance to what the call was. Steve?
Can we go back to your conversation with Boris Johnson? There was a case involving a car crash
I
involving
hate the case.
an American diplomat's wife. Did you bring?
That's
did
true.
you
We
talk
talked about it.
that? What did you decide?
So what we're going to do, it's a very, very complex issue, as you know, because we're talking about diplomatic immunity, which in itself is quite a subject, right? You people could lecture me on it, I suspect, but it's quite a subject. A terrible accident occurred. The person driving the car, they know who it was, and they have that on camera. A young man was killed on his motorcycle. He was killed. Sounds like instantly killed. The woman, through diplomatic immunity, left the UK, came back to America. And what I'm going to try and do and see, because I understand where the people from the UK are, and frankly, a lot of Americans feel the same way. I was telling Boris, we have a lot of Americans that, you know, they side on the fact that, you know, you have two wonderful parents that lost their son, and the woman was driving on the wrong side of the road. And that can happen. You know, those are the opposite roads. That happens. I won't say it ever happened to me, but it did. when you get used to driving on our system and then you're all of a sudden in the other system where you're driving, it happens. You have to be careful, very careful. So a young man was killed. The person that was driving the automobile has diplomatic immunity. We're going to speak to her very shortly and see if we can do something where they meet. It was an accident. It was a terrible accident.
For trial?
We're going
or-
to speak to her, and we're going to see the person driving the car, the wife of the diplomat. We're going to speak to her and see what we can come up with so that there can be some healing. There's tremendous anger over it. It's a terrible incident. There's tremendous anger, and I understand the anger from the other side very much.
When you met with Robert Mueller in May of 2017 in the Oval Office, were you in fact interviewing him for the position of FBI? And were you aware at the time that he was in the Oval Office that he had had prior conversations with Rod Rosenstein about potentially becoming special counsel?
Okay. To your second question, absolutely not. I had no idea that he was doing that. To the first question, he absolutely wanted to become the FBI director. And I said, no. I said, listen, you've been there for, I believe it was 12 years. And I said, no. And it has since been proven that I was right. Plus, we have witnesses to it. I interviewed numerous people that day. And he was one of the numerous people making a decision ultimately. But he was one of the people. I said, no. Nicely, respectfully.
About a potential conflict of interest because of the dispute he had with you over the golf membership?
I knew about it. We didn't speak about that because I wasn't going to accept him. That may have been one of the reasons I said no. Who knows? But I did have conflicts of interest with Robert Mueller. We had a business dispute. I thought we had, as you know, 3 basic conflicts of interest, and none of them were very good. But we had a business dispute. But I thought he was there for 12 years. That was long enough, especially when you saw what happened with the FBI. And you have to understand, nobody respects the FBI more than I do. And I think if you took a vote in the FBI, they'd vote me president right now. A vast, vast majority. And they're great people. I know a lot of them. But your leadership was terrible. Whether it was Comey or Mueller or anybody, this leadership turned out to be a disaster for this country. When you look at Strzok and Page, when you look at the insurance policy, you know, she's going to win, but just in case she doesn't, we have an insurance policy. Well, that only means one thing. There's no other interpretation. So when you look at that, no, Robert Mueller wanted a job to be the director, and I turned him very nicely, respectfully down. The other element of your question, I never heard that until just recently when it's being reported a little bit. Please, go
Coming
ahead.
up with China, are you optimistic that some sort of deal will be reached with
Well,
these
China
two-
wants to make a deal. In my opinion, China wants to make a deal more than I do. Okay? But look, I'm very happy right now. We're taking in billions of dollars of tariffs, and despite what the news was saying, there's no inflation. There's not a very big price increase, if any, because they've eaten the tariffs. They've devalued their currency, and they're pouring a lot of money into their system. Now, they've lost 3.5 million jobs, and their chain is breaking up. Their supply chain is breaking up like a broken egg. They want to make a deal. The question is, do I want to make a deal? And the answer would be, if we make the right deal, I'd love to do it. I think it would be a great thing for China also.
They seem to be reluctant to make concessions on IP and that's
Well, we'll
sports
see. I mean, you don't
technology.
know that. Look, there's so many false reports. Everybody's trying to guess. But there's really only 2 people that matter on this one, and that's President Xi and myself. We get along very well. I can't imagine he likes me the way he did when I first became president because, you know, it's been a rough time for China. China's gone down many trillions of dollars, and we've gone up many trillions of dollars. I mean, since I've been elected, many, many, many trillions of dollars have been increased the value of, if you call it value, you could call it worth or value of our country. We've increased, not just stock market, I'm talking our country. Our economy is bigger, it's stronger. And I believe if my opponent got in, you would have had a tremendous slide. And don't forget, I only look at our numbers from the day after the election because there was euphoria when I got elected. And we picked up a tremendous amount from, let's say, the 9th of November to January 20th when we had the inauguration. And it's been that way ever since. It's been a fantastic thing. But China wants to make a deal very badly, and if we can make a deal, we're going to make a deal. There's a really good chance. There's a really good chance, Steve.
Have you spoken at all, Mr. President, to the Attorney General about the coming Horowitz Inspector General's report and/or the Durham report?
No, I really am leaving that to the Attorney General, highly respected man, very highly principled man. I did read the Comey report, 78 pages of total kill, and I think it says, frankly, a lot to the Attorney General that he decided not to prosecute on that report, because I think most people reading that report would have done that. That report was horrible for Comey, horrible. But he's a highly principled man, and I'm leaving it up to him.
Can you tell us what you said to President Erdogan on Sunday and what he said to you? Did you promise him anything, or did he promise you anything on
No, we're
Sunday?
talking about it. No, but he said, I want to go in, I want to go in. But he's been telling me that for 2.5 years. He's been telling that virtually. He's been saying this for many years before me. And, you know, he's ready to do it. They've been, again, fighting for so long. They've been fighting for so many. This is like Israel and the Palestinians, okay? There's only one difference. Maybe the hatred's even greater. Is that possible? Maybe not. But this is a very, very serious hatred that's come over many years. Yes, sir.
The Kurds helped the U.S. defeat ISIS, and by allowing this offensive, is it going to be more difficult in future times of need to develop alliances?
No, it won't be. It won't be at all. Alliances are very easy. But, you know, our alliances have taken advantage of us. If you look at how much money we spend on NATO and how much money countries from Europe, who are really a much bigger beneficiary than we are, okay? You know, they're there and we're here. We're many miles away. Our alliances, in many cases, have taken tremendous advantage of us. If you look at NATO, I got them to pay $100 billion more. The Secretary General Stoltenberg came out with a report recently that because of President Trump, the other countries, 28 countries, so 27, not including us, they paid over $100 billion more because of me. But still, as good as that is, sounds good, it's nothing compared to the kind of numbers you're talking about. So I'm very happy with that. But the United States is paying over 4%, and Germany is paying 1%. Maybe a tiny bit more, but I actually think the way you calculate it, because you can look at it many ways, it's probably less than 1%. France is paying less than what they're supposed to. Out of the 28 countries, 20 of them are delinquent. You know what the delinquent means? That's an old real estate term. He's delinquent with his rent. They're delinquent with their payment. They owe us a tremendous amount of money, and they never pay us back. Because if Germany doesn't pay, they don't add that up. They just say, oh, that's okay. Then they don't pay again. Then if you go back that way, like the old-fashioned way, you don't pay and you owe it. But they don't pay, and they just go into the next year. They owe us hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. So, no, I don't look at it that way. Now, the Kurds are fighting for their land, just so you understand. They're fighting for their land. And as somebody wrote in a very, very powerful article today, they didn't help us in the Second World War. They didn't help us with Normandy, as an example. They mentioned names of different battles. They were there, but they're there to help us with their land, and that's a different thing. In addition to that, we have spent tremendous amounts of money on helping the Kurds in terms of ammunition, in terms of weapons, in terms of money, in terms of pay. With all of that being said, we like the Kurds. Now, you have different factions in there. Again, you have PKK, that's a different faction. And they worked with us. It's a rough group, but they worked with us. But we've spent a tremendous, and they're fighting for their land. So when you say they're fighting with us, yes, but they're fighting for their land. Now, if we go on the theory that some of the folks in Washington go by, who all do very well with the military-industrial complex. I mean, you know, the military-industrial complex, take a look at Dwight Eisenhower. He had it figured right many years ago. It's got tremendous power. They like fighting. They make a lot of money when they fight. But it was time to bring our soldiers back home. So I see, and I will tell you, the hardest thing I have to do, by far, much harder than the witch hunt, is signing letters to parents of soldiers that have been killed. And it's not only that, in areas where there's not a lot of upside, if there's any upside at all, and in many cases there's only downside. And especially when that soldier was killed in a blue-on-green attack. You know what that is, right? That's where a soldier being trained or whatever turns his gun on an American soldier. Here, son, take your gun. You know how to use it. And he takes the gun and he turns it and he shoots one. We have many of them in Afghanistan, in particular in Afghanistan. The hardest thing I have to do is signing those letters. That's the hardest thing I have to do. And each letter is different. We make each letter different. And last week I signed 5 of them for Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, 1 in Syria from 2 weeks ago. And sometimes I call the parents, sometimes I see the parents. I go to Dover when I can, but it's so devastating for the parents that, you know, it's so devastating. When they bring that boy or young woman out of the back of those big, powerful planes in a coffin, and the parents are there. You know, we have people that do that. That's what they do. They work that. They accommodate everybody. That's what they do. They do an incredible job. And I said, the parents seem to be okay. I'll get there early. The parents seem to be okay. Well, actually, sir, they aren't. No, the way they're talking, they're really okay, aren't they? Sir, you never know until the back of that massive cargo plane opens up and they walk down holding a coffin with 4 or 5 great soldiers on each side of it, representing our various forces. That you never know. And then I see it, and I see people that were smiling, oh, Mr. President, thank you for being here, thank you for being here, and I think they're doing great. And then 20 minutes later, we'll be outside when that big plane pulls up, and that door comes down, and they are walking the coffin with their boy inside this coffin with an American flag over the top, and they're walking that coffin down this ramp. And I've seen people that I thought were really incredible, the way they were, I didn't even understood how they could take it so well. Scream like I've never seen anything before. Sometimes they'll run to the coffin. They'll break through military barriers. They'll run to the coffin and jump on top of the coffin, crying, mothers and wives crying desperately. And this is on these endless wars that just never stop. And there's a time and there's a place, but it's time to stop. And just to finish, last Friday I went to Walter Reed, and I gave out 5 Purple Hearts to incredible young men, in this case, all men. And they took a beating. Beautiful people, they took a beating. One couldn't be there because the beating was so great that he was at a totally different part of the world. He lost a leg, he lost an arm. Ryan, he had tremendous damage, beyond even what these young folks went through. But I'll tell you what, for me, it's very hard when I see that. It's very hard. It's easy to talk tough, you know, tough guys, all these tough guys. Let's keep fighting, let's keep fighting. If they had to go to Walter Reed, where they do unbelievable work, I have to tell you, these doctors are unbelievable. You know, it's easy to say, oh, they're the best in the world. I've never seen anything like it. One young man last week had his nose rebuilt. And they said it was in 1,000 pieces. And I said, so where were you hurt? He said, my face, sir, was almost obliterated. I said, you have a better face than I do. He said, sir, I had a doctor who was unbelievable. And they put it together. He said 1,000 fragments. Now, I don't know if that's even possible, but 1,000 fragments. And they put it together. And his father, who was crying, came up to me and said, you're not going to believe this, but my son didn't have a great-looking nose, and now his nose is better. Okay? It's an amazing thing. But when you see these at the Purple Hearts, you see this kind of thing, and I see a lot of it at Walter Reed. And again, the job those doctors and the people do at Walter Reed, it's something to be commended. Thank you all very much. Thank you.